Hello, and welcome to today's CSBA webinar, where CSBA leadership and the Transitional Working Group will discuss the essential role of county boards, both to this organization and to public education in California. It's no secret there's been a lot of discussion and in some quarters, some discontent over the transition from CCBE to CSBA. And we're going to discuss that head on today as we examine issues including, but not limited to, the rationale and timeline for the development of county board member services, the purpose and progress of the Transitional Working Group, a review of county board reserves, preliminary results from the Transitional Working Group survey of county trustees, an overview of the new Region 14 devoted to county boards, and the intersection of county boards and CSBA's governmental advocacy as it relates to legislative committee and county input on important legislation. It's a full agenda, but before we go any further, we'll address a few housekeeping details to help everyone participate fully in today's event. You'll see at the end of the presentation that we'll have a question and answer segment where we will try our best to answer the questions you submitted. Many people submitted questions as requested during the registration process. We have those and are prepared to answer. In addition, we're going to allow extra questions to be submitted during the first 10 minutes of this webinar. So if you did not submit a question during the registration phase and have something you'd like to ask, please do submit that now within the next 10 minutes, and we will include that for review and for presentation as a potential question. We would also like, before we get into the heart of the webinar, to talk about some of the people, to introduce some of the people who will be participating today and hopefully providing the knowledge and insight you need as we continue to navigate the transformation to county board member services. We are fortunate to have with us today CSBA 2024 President and Santa Clara USD Trustee, Albert Gonzalez. We also have Ramon Flores, who is a Ventura County Office of Education Trustee, as well as a Transitional Working Group member. Mike Walsh, who is a Butte County Office of Education Trustee and Transitional Working Group member. Vernon M. Billy, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the California School Boards Association. And Aisha Knowles, who is an Alameda County Office of Education Trustee and Transitional Working Group member. And John McPherson, a Monterey County Office of Education Trustee member, and also Interim non-voting director on the CSBA Board of Directors. And Carlos Machado, our legislative advocate in our Governmental Relations Department, who handles most of the bills that intersect with COE responsibilities. My name is Troy Flynn. I'm the Chief of Communications here at CSBA, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. As always, please know that with our webinars, this is being recorded, so you will be able to view this webinar at a future date. Often people ask that in the questions as we go through the webinar. Just know that, yes, this is being recorded and you will receive a copy. And that copy will be sent before the close of business on Friday, May 10th, so you won't have to wait long. So with no further ado, let's get to the heart of the matter. I will turn it over to our CSBA 24 President, Albert Gonzalez.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to listen to and engage with us on this important matter of county school boards. This won't be an easy conversation, but it's a necessary one. CSBA is stronger when county boards play a vital part in the organization and receive the services, products, and supports needed to thrive in your governance role. County boards serve as some of the highest need students in our state, and the success of county offices of education and county boards is integral to the CSBA's own success. Our mission at CSBA is to strengthen and promote school board governance and to drive the public education agenda through advocacy, training, and member services. Vigorous representation and robust support of county boards is required to meet this goal and to provide a high quality education for every student in every community. So CSBA has every reason to make county board member services a success, to ensure that county boards play a vital role in the organization, and to continue to expand and enhance the offerings we provide county boards. That said, I recognize not all of our board members believe CSBA will value and serve county boards appropriately, absent the institution of CCBE. It's no surprise that I disagree, as I've outlined in previous communications, but in an organization of this size and diversity, there will always be disagreements and sometimes heated ones. I'm not deterred, though, by the prospect of conflict. Instead, I'm motivated to do what's best for the organization and our mission to help ensure our members have the resources, conditions, and policies needed to provide a high-quality education for all. I understand that this has been a difficult time for many trustees, county trustees who have had a strong history and appreciation for CCBE. I realize the transition from CCBE to County Board Member Services has been a trying one for some. I don't expect any letter or webinar will magically change that, but I can assure you that the board of directors, which included 4 county trustees at the time of the vote to create the County Board Member Services, did not take this step lightly. The decision to launch the County Board Member Services was motivated by a vision of enhanced support for county boards, as well as occasionally tumultuous history with CCBE, operating as a subsection of and within the statutory confines of CSBA. Our belief then and now is that CBMS, or the County Board Member Services, will offer expanded high-quality training offerings developed for county board members, input on future products and services, and deeper integration of county boards via recommendation from the County Board Transitional Working Group, which we'll hear from later today as the representatives speak. Surveys of county board members to gain further insight into your needs and feedback that can be used to improve supports. A new subcommittee of the Annual Education Conference Planning Committee, composed of county board members to identify county-oriented content and recommendations for enhanced board member experience at CSBA's annual conference. A new county director position on the CSBA board of directors, and the creation of a new CSBA statewide region 14, composed entirely of county board delegates. In addition to the opportunity to provide enhanced services, products, and supports, the desire for alignment within the CSBA structure, compliance with CSBA laws, and reduction of liability also contributed to the decision to create CSBA County Board Member Services. We only touched on this topic lightly in the initial communications because rather than looking backwards, we wanted to look forward and see what we can do in the present and near term to create an even better future for county boards. Since that time, however, we have continued to field questions from various county boards, questioning whether the creation of the County Board Member Services was necessary and why the discussions leading up to that occurred within the board of directors instead of with CCBE membership more broadly. First, I note that 4 CCBE members serve on CSBA board of directors and representatives of county trustees when the vote was taken to transition to CSBA's County Board Member Services, and were privy to and had the opportunity to contribute to discussions throughout. Secondly, the nature of the process for approving County Board Member Services was also motivated in part by repeated CCBE actions that were misaligned with CSBA's process or structure. CCBE leadership had a documented history of courting, negotiating, and reaching agreements with other organizations outside of CSBA and without CSBA's involvement. This behavior continued despite repeated admonishments from CSBA. The persistent pattern of behavior conflicted with CSBA bylaws, undermined the relationship between CCBE and CSBA, and disregarded the fact that CSBA is a legal entity responsible for all actions of subsidiary entities connected to the association through our bylaws or legal structure, including subsections like CCBE. Given this, the CSBA board of directors felt that the structure of CCBE, where it operated as an independent organization within the association, was misaligned with CSBA's governance structure, exposed the organization to liability, and ran counter to our desire to foster unified membership with a shared mission, vision, and strategic goals. CSBA County Board Member Services will allow us to operate within that framework while continuing to collaborate with county trustees to enhance CSBA's offerings for county boards. The body that is guiding this partnership is a Transitional Working Group, which began meeting in January and is just 5 months into the process. The Transitional Working Group is composed of 15 county trustees, including past presidents of CCBE and former CCBE directors, the majority of whom were identified by then CCBE President John McPherson. You'll hear from John later today when he explains the structure of the new Region 14 county boards. The Transitional Working Group is tasked with providing CSBA's Board of Directors with recommendations about the future services and supports county board members need. The members of the Transitional Working Group are demographically and ideologically diverse and include trustees with decades of experience and involvement in CSBA and CCBE. The members of this committee are bright, dedicated people who are committed to the county boards, to the students who are educated by the county offices, and the work of ensuring the best possible outcome from the transition to the county board member services. To share what they've been focused on so far, I'll turn it over to Ramon Flores and Mike Walsh. Gentlemen.
Thank you, President Gonzalez. I'm Mike Walsh, and I'm going to go ahead and get this conversation started. And Dr. Ramon Flores will be joining me as well. And as you've heard, ladies and gentlemen, what President Gonzalez, what Albert was just saying, that we've been tasked with providing CSBA Board of Directors with recommendations about the future services and supports that county members need, county board members need. And we started this work back in January, and we have met multiple times with emphasis on multiple. I have lost count, but we have been working hard on this. And so if you'll go ahead and move slides forward for me, please. So go ahead and update that slide to the next one, please. The next one. Good. Here's what I wanted to do. I want to start by talking about the Transition Working Group, but something about this sentiment that, if I will, with great apologies to Robert Brown, a board member from Shasta County Office of Ed, and apologies to Yvonne Chan from LACO. I didn't verify the words with you, but I did my best to get the sentiment. This kind of came up naturally in one of our recent meetings. And what Robert really talked about was his change in perspective, that this notion of what was being done to county board members, really about it now being about this opportunity, what's being done for. And I think that's important because as he made that statement, it was like he hit a certain note in the choir, and you could hear several other members chime in with that same realization, that same understanding as we've been going through the work over these multiple meetings in the past. And right on cue, Yvonne shared this notion that really we have this opportunity to move beyond just this transitioning, and we've got to be more transformative. We have this chance to be transformative. And as she said that, once again, the choir responded with this, just the resonance of how important that really is, because we do have this opportunity to make this even better for county board members. So next slide, please. And this is the group. And as President Gonzalez mentioned just a few moments ago, if you'll notice, we are from all over California, whether we're predominantly rural, predominantly urban, coastal, Northern California, Southern California. We represent a various degrees of not only geographical representation, but the conversations that we have had have been varied as well. And I don't want this to sound like we've been arm in arm, kumbaya from day one. I guarantee you, we have not shied away from difficult conversations at all. It's as if in this working group, we respect those difficult conversations and we welcome them. And we've had quite a few. And again, in spite of all those conversations, the group seems to be coalescing around this opportunity to transform the services that CSBA supports and shares on county board members' respect, especially with the unique role that President Gonzalez outlined already that we serve around the work of the students that we have. So if I could have the next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about recent event, and the one that really I think stands out for me is the next slide, please, as we talk about the March 8th and 9th County Board Governance Workshop. And again, in this workshop, we had quite a few conversations that were the typical. We talked about boardroom decorum, expulsions, charter school renewals, understanding county budgets, SELPAs. We had those conversations, which you would expect at a workshop for county board members. But we also had an opportunity with myself and John McPherson. We talked about the road towards expanded county services. So again, this is one of the workshops that John and myself led. By the way, if we go ahead and advance it one more slide, please. And again, this is a lovely picture of everyone who was attending at the time who didn't run away from the camera. There were a few more people who slid out of that, but this is the folks that we captured, and it was a wonderful workshop. And again, as you can see, the normal things that we talked about. But what I wanted to highlight that came out of that conversation, again, as a working group, we're talking about transitioning. We felt it was important to give voice to those who were in the room regarding challenges that we've had in the process, which it became clear the communication was the area that we struggled with the most, and we're addressing that in the future meetings, as well as the top 3 things that seemed to float to the top for everyone in the room was, 1, maintaining county identity, which again, that's critical because of the work that we do and the nature that we touch those 6 million or so students throughout. We also talked about the clarity that was important for dues, structure, and impacts moving forward. You'll hear more about that momentarily, and also about maintaining a focus on county-specific training. These opportunities such as the fall and the spring conferences. Again, you're going to hear more about that. Talked about county-specific MIG training, et cetera, and a lot of those things. We heard, and we've been working hard to hear from more of you. Someone else will be talking to you later about the surveys that we have, that we are still asking for this information. My point is simply this: the Transition Working Group has been meeting. We've been working, we've been having all of those conversations. We've looked and read everything, and we understand the concerns, and we're making sure that we figure out ways to address those concerns as we move those recommendations forward. And there is still time for you to share more with us. A couple of other little subcommittees I will mention, and I believe Dr. Flores is going to talk more about them, but just the notion of our work isn't just about that transition, but we are also subdividing ourselves into even more subcommittees around the September CSBA County Board Member Conference, otherwise known as the Fall Conference that typically happens in Monterey. We're focused on what to do about the county trustee handbook. How do we make sure that's a tool that's available and can be utilized by other board members throughout? We're focusing again, another subcommittee is around county masters in governance work. And finally, one that I think is really important for me as well, the Jack Bedell Award for County Board Excellence. So this is kind of where we are at the moment, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ramon Flores right now so he can talk a little more about as we are, again, continuing to move forward. So Dr. Flores, if you'll please.
Thanks, Mike. Can we go to the next slide, please? So hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share time and space with you. I really a privilege here. So Dr. Ramon Flores, past CCBE president, and want to touch on, again, some of the work that's been done by the committee already and some of the work that we're going to be doing, and really on this notion that Mike touched about of we are in a position to do something transformative. So quick example, in the past, CCBE held 3 specific training opportunities. We had in March, our governance workshop in Sacramento. In September, we had our fall conference in Monterey, and then we will follow that up with the CSBA annual educational conference, again, toggling between San Diego and San Francisco. Now, because I was former CCBE president, that meant I was also a former CCBE vice president. And in that capacity, I was in charge of putting on the fall conference in Monterey. So I've got experience with that training opportunity. 2 years ago, I was asked to lead the planning committee for the March conference. That was in 2023. Great opportunity for me to work with some of our county board members. And then this year, when President McPherson asked me to be part of the Transition Working Group, I was asked specifically to sit in on the subcommittee that dealt with our March conference. So again, 2 experiences with the March conference, 1 experience with the fall conference. And the reason I say that or bring that up is these were always seen in my mind as discrete events. And now, because of the work of the Transition Working Group that we have here that we're doing, we have got an opportunity to be transformative. So instead of seeing these 3 events as discrete, we can see them as continuous. This notion, this idea of having a through line between all these training opportunities. And again, that wasn't a thought process that we had in the past. They were discrete, they were separate, but now we have a chance to build upon one another. So again, have content for newly elected board members, and then build upon that and have content for more seasoned board members. So can we go to the next slide, please? So again, as Mike mentioned, we had our training evolution in March, and right now we have a subcommittee of the Transition Working Group that is looking at our September conference. And again, this notion of a conference by county board members for county board members is the overarching theme that we have. If you are familiar with this training evolution, again, September is the typical time frame, and as usual, we have it at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. There are going to be a couple of new opportunities, some new areas of engagement specifically dealing with updates on the Brown Act, dealing with updates on ethics training. Again, those will be pre-conference features. But again, this notion, one of the comments I keep hearing is what's unique about our trainings is because it's by county board members, for county board members, this notion of networking and having an opportunity to meet with fellow county trustees from up and down the state and just share either best practices or lessons learned or those things. So we make sure that those opportunities are there so that we can maintain this notion of growth from one another. So again, when you get a chance, please visit our CSBA website and to learn more details about this training opportunity that's going to be available to us. Next slide, please. Okay, so a couple of the topics that the Transition Working Group is working on right now. Can we forward, please? So again, what we have available to us is this notion of just such great wealth from the composition of our group. Again, 15 members up and down the state. You've got 4 former CCBE presidents. Mr. Walsh is very humble, former CSBA president as part of our group. And again, some newer board members to give us that fresh perspective, that fresh set of eyes, if you will, on some of the content areas that we're trying to look at. Specifically, the handbook. We have got a subcommittee on that, and we have spent quite a bit of time looking and discussing on that handbook, looking at the content and what training is related that might be integrated into that handbook as future evolutions of that get promulgated and get sent out to our committees. I already mentioned this notion of this through line for our county training evolution. So instead of discrete events, this notion of let's build from one evolution to the next evolution to the next evolution. And again, it's an opportunity to have these discussions because it's the same body of people that are working on these training opportunities. We've talked about the importance of marketing and maintaining a specific county board self-evaluation. Preferably, this would be a tool that is online that counties can utilize and support the development of a high-functioning governance team. Again, we're always talking about the governance team being the board members plus our superintendent. We have, again, a great opportunity with the December conference because we have newly appointed county board members on the December committee that are strategizing on how to fully integrate content, county-specific content into that conference, as well as host a county-specific meal function. Transition Working Group members are thinking about the reach of that content beyond AEC and how that should flow into, again, the March and September events, this notion of growing from one training evolution to the other. Communications is huge for us. Again, as former vice president of CCBE, one of my functions was working with our one staffer to put out our quarterly newsletter. Well, that has been rolled into CSBA now. So now we're able to take advantage of the goodness that is the communications department of CSBA. So we are looking at print resources, what is needed by county board members and how it is accessible. We're devising ways for counties to submit content for publication as a way to highlight those promising and best practices and how to share that good work with our fellow trustees. And I want to close on this. I don't use the words honor and privilege very lightly. But again, it's an honor and a privilege for me specifically to work on the Jack Bedell Lifetime Achievement Award Subcommittee. For those of you who do not know, Jack Bedell was a longtime trustee from Orange County, also a professor at Cal State Fullerton. And so now the subcommittee is working with CSBA staff to roll into the Golden Bell Awards a Jack Bedell Lifetime Achievement Award. So again, truly an honor and a privilege to start the foundation, lay the foundation for a way to recognize all the good work that you, our county board members, do in honor of Dr. Jack Bedell. So that is it for the work so far. Next, you're going to hear from another Transition Working Group member, Ms. Aisha Knowles, who's going to share with you how you can provide feedback for some of these topics via the Transition Working Group County Survey that is currently open. So Aisha, over to you.
Actually, I think we're going to pivot to CSBA CEO and Executive Director Vernon and Billy to talk about the finances related to county services. And then Aisha will follow up with the Transitional Working Group Survey preliminary results.
Okay, thank you, Troy. And I'm going to really focus on just off the top, the CCB reserves. This is a question that has come up several times in the last few months. So if you could advance the next slide, please. So let's look at, what I want to do is just, first we'll start looking at the adopted budget of CCBE that was adopted by CCBE. Just a quick overview, just to kind of set the stage. The adopted budget had roughly $262,000 in revenue and $250,000 in expenses, with a projected ending net assets of about $12,000, $11,969. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the reserves themselves. And so I want to make sure everybody understands this. So CSBA's Board of Directors has an established CCBE designated reserve that will continue to be committed to supporting county board services. Any excess funds that are deposited into this reserve as a part of the current year will be dedicated to county board services in the subsequent year if needed. So to be clear, again, there is a designated reserve for CCBE within CSBA. And so we can keep track of that. Next slide, please. And so this slide, what this shows is what the reserve balance was as of June 30th, 2023, of approximately $143,000. And then what I'm showing on the right is the estimated June 30th, 2024 estimated reserves. And now what you'll see, obviously, is that we're estimating that that reserve balance will go up approximately $60,000. Again, this is just an estimate. And that increase, if you will, of the reserve is a result of the second half of the fiscal year, where there are expenses that were budgeted as a part of CCBE will not exist. And so as a result, it creates a savings, and those savings will go into that existing reserve. Again, I want to be clear, this is an estimated reserve, and then once the fiscal year is closed out, then we'll be able to have an accounting of what the reserves are for this current fiscal year. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide here, I just want to give you some examples of potential uses of the reserves. And again, I'm going to state it probably 3 or 4 times. These are just examples. CSB directors has not made any decisions about the use of the reserve funds. But because this question comes up and people have offered our ideas, I just wanted to mention a few for all of you. If the reserves are needed to be used, they could be used to pay for the CSBA county dedicated staff person, which is consistent with the requests that we had from the CCB leadership as this transition was going forward, was that there be a county person, a dedicated county staff person. Again, this is just an example if the reserve funds were ever accessed or needed. Another potential example is to pay for expenses not covered by the registration fees for the September fall conference for county board members. Based on the work of the Transitional Working Group and what they propose and what's approved by CSBA's Board of Directors, it could be a new activity. I think it goes back to that opportunity that Mike and Ramon were referencing a few moments ago. But again, that is yet to be decided, and that any use of these funds, again, will depend on what happens going forward. And of course, there are other possibilities, and we don't know. But right now, the funds are there and are not being accessed. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do now is, again, just give a different look from that first pie graph that I showed you of the revenue and expenses. And I'm going to start on the expense side, and that's everything here on the right side of the pie graph, and kind of look at where were the expenses of CCBE. And again, this is all based on the adopted budget, the 2023-24 budget. I just want to keep repeating that as well. This is the budget that was adopted by CCBE. So like in many of your districts or county offices, for those of you who are watching, salary and benefits for an employee typically take up a big chunk of your expense line item, and that's the same case here. for the dedicated county person that CSBA has employed. You can see roughly what the salary and benefits would look like based on the adopted budget. Next expense was for conferences and trainings. That took up a big chunk of expenses, as you can see there. And then the next expense item was for the board and executive committee expenses of CCBE, followed by overhead, admin, and staff travel, excuse me. And so obviously overhead includes things like copier supplies and other things of that nature. Next slide, please. And this is just another look, just at looking at expenses. Again, total expenses about $250,000, and then just another look of how that broke down. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide here, again, we're working off of the adopted budget. The membership, looking at the membership dues of approximately $169,000. Again, comparing to expenses. If you, on the right-hand side, the expenses are $180,000. The difference here is these are the expenses not associated with a program. They're non-program fee-based expenses. So they exclude things like the March training, they exclude things like the September conference, where you paid a registration fee and there was cost associated with putting on that event. If you take those out, this is what the expense side would look like. Next slide, please. Okay, now here, let's look at the revenue. Again, the revenue of about $262,000. The vast majority of that revenue came from the membership dues. Again, you see the number of the 169,000, sponsorships of about $18,000, and then from program/conference revenue was about $75,000, and that's the yellow. Next slide, please. So here, this slide here is pulling out the program revenue only. So it's back to that $75,000 that was from the pie graph on the previous slide. So this represents what was in that $75,000. You had the September conference, you see there, the March training, and then the general membership. Okay. Next slide, please. This, again, as a part of the program revenue, we're looking at the conference here, the September conference, and the registration fees and sponsorships, that's what is paid for the conference. And again, there's the $55,000 and the $18,000 that you saw in the previous pie graph, and then the expenses were approximately $49,160. Which left a net of about $24,400 based on the budgeted amount for the conference. And so from there, that $24,000, basically what you see is that there's a $24,000 net. On the previous slide, there was a revenue line for the general membership. The revenue from the general membership, meaning it did not cover all of the expenses. So essentially the net from the conference covered the expenses for that meeting, and roughly, give or take, about $11,000 or $12,000, which then left, from a budgeted perspective, that $11,969,000 of net assets, or $12,000 approximately, net assets that I showed on the original slide. That $12,000 would then fall over into the CCBE reserve that I started the discussion off with. So that would fold right into that, adding to the reserves going into the following fiscal year. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, again, CSBA has a designated reserve that if ever used will be dedicated to activities that support county board members through CSBA County Board Services. The CCBE Reserve Fund has not been touched. and will likely grow at the end of this fiscal year due to the elimination of previous expenses and as a result of the transition. CCBE dues primarily helped pay for a dedicated staff person as requested by CCBE, by CSBA, and costs to support the overall administrative activities, including travel, overhead, and the regular meetings of the CCBE board and executive committee. The registration fees help paid for by the attendees, and the sponsorships helped pay for the conferences and the trainings and the other meeting expenses to result in that net asset of about $11,900. And with that, I will turn it over to Troy.
Thank you, Vernon, for that overview. And now, as previously mentioned, we will go to Aisha and Knowles for a look at the Transitional Working Group survey and their preliminary results. Aisha.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you, Vernon, Ramon, Mike, and President Gonzalez. I am happy to join everyone to share some of the information about the Transitional Work Group survey. Next slide, please. So the members of the Transitional Work Group developed this survey for the purpose of collecting information from county board members. We want to hear from you. 45 questions may seem like a lot, but as we are looking to be transformative and with all that we have experienced over the last couple of years as county board members, this is a great opportunity for us to revisit county-specific topics, our trainings, the events that we've had, and really think about what we can do to either continue to build upon those things, make some adjustments, and or improve. So the survey will take about 10 to 12 minutes, depending on what you have on your mind and the type of feedback you'd like to contribute. And it highlights networking opportunities, resources that have been used in the past, the conference, many of the topics that we receive regular communications about, but this gives us an opportunity to be specific to how we can interact with and utilize those items as county board members. Next slide, please. So our hope as a transitional work group is that we receive feedback and input on the survey from county board members throughout the state. So we know that there is a diversity within many of the county board members who are on this call or on this Zoom, on this webinar. And so we really want to hear from you. We know that some are from small counties, large counties, urban, rural counties. This survey was created with everyone in mind so that we can gather as much information as possible across the spectrum of board members that are part of, the former CCBE, so that we can inform decisions to recommend as part of the larger CSBA group. Next slide, please. So this survey addresses the former CCBE trainings and their effectiveness, CSBA's annual education conference and trade show, and what it offers to county board members, how the County Office of Education Masters in Governance program can be incorporated into larger trainings for county board members. And the survey asked for feedback on the former county board member handbook. So the survey specifically asks you for your individual and or local training needs related to the content. So we are currently in phase 1, in the data collection phase, and we encourage anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to complete the survey to please fill it out by the close of business on May 10th. So you have 2 days from the date of this webinar to complete the survey. Next slide, please. So now I'll highlight some of the responses so far on the survey. So as you can see, our preliminary results have been gathered from 46 respondents. And we look forward to additional county board members contributing their input. But so far, what we've collected reflects information about the CCBE March training, the September conference, and the AEC conference are all successful and have been productive events that people would like to see continue. Some of the topics that those who've taken the opportunity to respond so far include trainings or upcoming trainings related to advocacy, board member and superintendent relationships, charter school oversight and renewals, and court and community schools. Also, I think some items that have been shared are related to the budget and interdistrict transfer appeals, as well as the roles and responsibilities of a county board of education trustee. Next slide, please. Okay, so a number of people have shared that they've had enough of online webinars and Zoom meetings, so they'd like to continue in-person events. And there also are some who would like to see the access to webinars continue. So that was a good balance. And then we also have results reflecting that the networking opportunities have been extremely valuable, and board members would like to see in-person networking events continue as we move forward. Next slide, please. Now, all of the respondents who've completed the survey did share that they have a copy of the CCBE trustee handbook, and of those trustees, 68% find the publication to be extremely valuable. A majority of respondents would like to see 1 to 2 page fact sheets to digest county-specific research, and nearly half of respondents want research presented via webinars. Next slide, please. So you've heard a lot of information in the webinar so far, and as was mentioned before, we have 46 county board members that have had the chance to complete the survey. We encourage anyone who has not yet had the chance to complete it to please fill it out so that we are representing your thoughts and vision for this new transformation as part of the survey. And you have 2 days to complete the survey. Thank you so much. Troy, back to you.
Thank you, Aisha. We really appreciate that rundown of the survey, and we look forward to the final survey. So as Aisha mentioned, if you haven't submitted already, please provide your response to the survey before the close of business this Friday, May 10th. And with that, I will hand it over to John McPherson to talk about the new Region 14.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you for everyone else who went before. We talked a lot about the services and the things that county board members expect for their membership in CSBA, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how now, with CCBE no longer being a section of CSBA, how county members will organize within CSBA, and that is the new Region 14, which will be the first statewide region for CSBA. Next slide, please. Okay, this has been covered to some degree, but we'll go through it fairly quickly. At its December 2023 meeting, the CSBA Board of Directors voted to remove from the standing rules the designation of a section for the county boards of education. So CCBE existed as part of the standing rules for CSBA. The CSBA Board of Directors has a sole authority over what is in the standing rules. In its place, the CSBA Board of Directors set in motion the creation of a statewide region within the current CSBA governance structure for a region of the established county delegates and the creation of a Region 14 director that would take the place of the CCBE president on the CSBA Board of Directors. So, and I've seen in the chat questions about why is this this being voted on by the full delegate assembly. As I said before, anything that has to do with the standing rules of CSBA are governed by the Board of Directors. Anything that changes the bylaws has to be voted on by the full delegate assembly. And so in order to create Region 14 and the Region 14 director, that requires a change in the bylaws, and that is why it's going to be voted on at the delegate assembly. The Region 14 and the Region 14 director would replicate the CCBE Board of Directors and the CCBE president in form and function, and we'll talk a little bit about more about that in the next slide. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is draw a line or a connection between what was CCBE and the CCBE Board of Directors and Officers versus what Region 14 is. Very, very quickly, for those who are unfamiliar, all members of CSBA, so all school board members, are organized into regions. These are, until now, geographic regions. And each one of those regions has a director elected by the members of that region, and that director sits on the CSBA Board of Directors. Okay, so before, CCBE Board of Directors was comprised of CSBA county delegates elected by all county boards in their geographic CSBA region. So for each region, there is an election amongst the county boards for the county delegate for that geographic region, and that person sat on the CCBE Board of Directors. Region 14 will be comprised of county delegates elected by all the county boards in their geographic region. So the person who was a county delegate and sat on the CCBE Board of Directors, that county delegate will now be part of the Region 14. So that is how the Region 14 statewide region will be populated. Important to note that our county delegates will still continue to caucus with their geographic region as well as caucusing with the statewide region. So they will, in essence, they will wear two hats. It's important that we don't lose that geographic connection with the other school board members in our geographic region. So we want to keep that in place, as well as now meeting as the CCBE Board of Directors did as a group of county delegates. Okay, next, the CCBE president. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was next. Yeah. The CCBE president was elected every year by a vote of all county boards and serves for 1 year and was a member of the CSBA Board of Directors for 1 year. And I am a former CCBE president, and I've been associated with CCBE for a long time. This, I think, was one of the negatives in the structure of CCBE that led to a disconnect with the rest of the organization and the rest of the CSBA Board of Directors, because we were turning over our representative on the Board of Directors every year, whereas other members of the board serve a minimum of 2 years and then can be reelected. And so very, very difficult for that CCBE president to get ingrained in what the board was doing. And as soon as the CCBE president did get it up to speed, we were changing it again. We're addressing that with the creation of a Region 14 director, will be elected every 2 years by the Region 14 delegates and serves for 2 years, a member of the CSBA Board of Directors for 2 years, and can be reelected, which is consistent with what happens with the other regional directors. Okay, programming under CCBE, programming for county-specific conference and workshop, developed and executed by the CSBA staff and the CCBE appointed committees. So that's how we did it as CCBE. Under the new Region 14, programming for county-specific conference and workshop developed and executed by CSBA staff and CSBA committee county members appointed by the CSBA president with input from the Region 14 directors. So the transition group has heard loud and clear in all the communication that we received that one of the things we really want to make sure we don't lose is county members giving input on county program, whether it be the workshop or conference sessions or whatnot. So that is something that the transition group is working out the details on how, what committees that will entail and how many members and so forth, but that is a point of emphasis. And then finally, when it comes to advocacy, which is critically important to county members, we've heard that over and over again. There are 4 county members on the CSBA legislative committee. That was under CCBE, and there will continue to be 4 county members on the CSBA legislative committee, with one of those now the Region 14 director. And so that, I think, is an important connection, again, between what we need as county members and how we connect with the rest of the organization as it relates to ledge action. And the one thing that's not on the slide is we also, every CSBA region has a PACER, and we get our own PACER. And I'm calling our PACER Rachel a super PACER. And so that's something that's going to be very beneficial. Next slide, please. And it's not Rachel, it's Raquel. My mistake. Okay, so the Region 14 timeline. Again, so this takes us from the start, which was back in December, to where we plan to be at the end of the year. The CSBA bylaw revision approved by the CSBA board in January 27th to add a statewide region for county members, designated Region 14, to include a regional director that would sit on the CSBA board of directors for a 2-year term starting in December 2024. CCBE no longer was a section of CSBA as of January 29th. So now we're in a transition period from when that action was taken by the board as it relates to the standing rules to now the action that needs to be taken by the full delegate assembly for the bylaws change. An interim non-voting position created to represent county members on the CSBA board of directors until the installment of the Region 14 director. That's me. I've attended 1 board meeting under this status, and I will attend the May board meeting as the same. There's an action item at the May CSBA Delegate Assembly to accept the bylaw recommendation to create Region 14 and a Region 14 director. This requires a 2/3 vote to pass. Next, if approved, there will be a 30-day window for county delegates to recommend to the CSBA president someone for appointment to the director position for the balance of the year. The appointment will occur approximately mid-January or mid-June, excuse me. So once the region is created, the director position will be treated as if it's a vacant director position, which is something that happens on occasion with other regional directors. And so there is already in the bylaws and standing rules a process for appointing a director to a vacancy. And so that's what will happen. The president, Albert, will send out a communication to the Region 14 delegates, so the CSBA county delegates, asking for input on who should be appointed to fill out the term through December, and then the delegates will give that input to Albert. There will be a 30-day window for that process to happen, and then Albert will make an appointment, and there will be a special meeting of the CSBA Board of Directors to accept that appointment. So now with all that happening, we have a Region 14, we have a Region 14 director, and Region 14's first meeting will take place at the county conference in September. We have already baked into the schedule for the conference the time necessary for that meeting to take place. And then the Region 14 director election for the 2-year term starting in 2025 will be by county delegates. So the all county delegates who are part of Region 14, the election will be by the county delegates at the December delegate assembly. And so that concludes my review of Region 14, and I'm sure we'll have some questions here shortly.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. We will now turn it over to CSBA Legislative Advocate Carlos Machado to discuss the relationship between county boards and our governmental relations and advocacy.
Thank you, Troy. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So here's an outline of the general items that I will be discussing today. I'll start with a look at CSBA's Legislative Committee, and then moving on to CSBA advocacy on legislation and on budget items on behalf of county boards, and then wrapping up with information on SB 1380, CSBA's co-sponsored bill on charter school authorizing. Next slide, please. So let's start with the Legislative Committee. Next slide. So it can't be overstated the role that CSBA's legislative program plays in positioning CSBA as a leader in education policy. Even though some of our education partners have tools like candidate packs, CSBA has earned a strong reputation over the years for taking positions that put students and schools first. This focus on students, schools, and also on local control are part of the core beliefs upon which CSBA policy positions are based and are woven into CSBA's policy platform. Sponsored bills, bill analyses, and their adjoining position recommendations are guided by CSBA's policy platforms and its pillars. The process by which CSBA takes positions on a bill or considering a bill to sponsor involves our members throughout the process. Our advocates work with board members, and policy experts in some instances have worked with them for years. These contacts provide valuable feedback on new and existing issues, which is then incorporated into our analysis and recommended positions. The analysis provide context, and in some instances may lay out the history of the policy, and those are combined to kind of set the stage for the change proposed in the bill. These analyses are shared with committee members in advance of legislative committee meetings and are the basis of its discussion. The committee has the option of going with the recommendation proposed or with a recommended position, or changing it with policy, political, and strategic considerations taken into consideration. Ideas for sponsoring bills often come from our own members on the legislative committee or the broader CSBA membership. These ideas are then developed with the help of input from various sources, including our members. CSBA's legislative committee receives updates on these bills and issues that might arise from a sponsored bill. And then these are discussed with the committee and with individual members, depending on the subject matter and their experience with it. Whether it pertains to a sponsored bill proposal or bill position, we regularly solicit input from board members throughout the process. The path that the bill follows is months long, and there are multiple opportunities to weigh in and seek changes to bill language if that's necessary. The Legislative Committee is updated on new amendments that could have an impact on our current position, which can be revisited by the committee and modified accordingly. The committee meets roughly on a monthly basis, mostly in person. The meetings occur during the legislative schedule, starting in earnest with the bill introduction deadline. So let's start with the basic structure of the committee. The Legislative Committee consists of 24 members and is chaired by CSBA's president-elect. Next slide, please. So the county board representation on the Legislative Committee consists of 4 seats on the committee. And those seats currently comprise of CSBA's immediate or CCBE's immediate past president. And based upon John's presentation, that will, going forward, is going to be the county board director. And then the other 3 positions that are held by county board members right now are either region directors or delegates. The influence that counties have on the legislative committee is significant. They make up nearly 20% of the committee's membership. The GR team works closely with these members throughout the course of their time on the committee. We also work closely with the committee's county board members to identify issues that may need attention through legislation or in the budget and regularly solicit their input. A point that some members who have not served on legislative committee before may not know is that our analyses are formatted to consider the impact that each bill has on a county. Details on these impacts will often be covered in detail in the analysis provided to the legislative committee. Next slide, please. So let's look more closely at the various avenues that county board members have to share their input on important policy and budget matters. As noted earlier, the county board director will be a member of the CSBA legislative committee. But the director is not the only county board member serving on the legislative committee, as I indicated earlier. There are at least 3 other county board members on the committee currently and going forward. County boards also have other points of contact within CSBA, including CSBA Director at Large County and the many regional county delegates throughout the state. Lastly, the GR team is always available to county board members. We are individually can be reached out by county board members. We also have our pacers, which are located throughout the state, who can also be points of contact since we divide issue areas among our advocates. The pacers can help you identify which advocate's the best person to contact on a particular issue. Next slide, please. So following an overview of the legislative committee, it also makes sense to take a look at some of the results that have come out of that process. Next slide, please. So let's start with AB 2933. So knowing that county offices of education and districts would readily expand home to school transportation if the state paid for the real cost, this bill would have provided county offices of education and other LEAs with the necessary resources and flexibility for home to school transportation without the risk of diverting funds from other essential student programs. Support for going on to special education, support for special education funding is critical for counties. That's why it is consistently one of the priorities CSBA's advocacy efforts to have made to sustain and increase this important funding. And then thirdly on this list, SB 1315 is a bill CSBA is co-sponsoring to help reduce the unnecessary burdens on county offices of education and other LEAs. This measure would require the state to focus on the ever-growing number of existing and new reports that must be prepared by LEAs. County offices have limited staff and resources to identify, develop, and submit each of these reports, and SB 1315 will take us a step further towards helping to relieve this burden. And then last session, AB 417 was a bill that CSBA sponsored to make it explicit in statute that county boards have the authority to appoint a student board member to its governing board if one hadn't been selected by the students that are served by the county. So this would give them the ability to fill that position if that position is currently vacant. Next slide, please. AB 906, which CSBA co-sponsored with the California County Superintendents and the LA County Office of Education, would have addressed the need for sufficient and predictable resources for County Office of Education operated juvenile court schools and community schools. The bill established a base funding level that is more equitable and reflective of current day realities. The support was ultimately folded into the 23-24 budget. And then later CSBA also fought off additional accountability measures that would have made it, would have increased the workload for county offices under the new funding rubric. And then lastly, I wanted to touch upon AB 2118, which would ensure current court schools students have the same opportunities that former court school students have by requiring a juvenile court operated by County Office of Education to exempt a student from local graduation requirements. The bill creates parity for current court school students by aligning the statute governing current court school students with statutes governing other mobile student populations, allowing current court students to benefit from additional educational opportunities before graduating. So those are just to highlight some of the bills that we worked on that do affect County Office of Education and county boards, in addition to ones that we're continuing to identify now as our legislative committee work continues this legislative year. Next slide, please. So now I want to focus on a bill that CSBA is sponsoring, SB 1380, on charter school authorizing. Next slide, please. And there's two parts to the bill, but the part that I do want to focus on today relates directly to county boards of education, their role related to considering petitions to create new countywide charter schools. So this bill arose out of what we've seen is a growing problem with the countywide process being used or misused as a way around the district authorizing process. And this bill will help preserve the countywide process as it was intended under the original Charter School Act and as it was reformed in 2019. So one of the changes that the bill would make is that it would explicitly provide for a county board to make a finding to deny a petition that is substantially similar to one denied by a school district governing board. So, and then there's corresponding change in the provision in the existing statutory provision that pertains to the district authorizing statute. So in these instances, we've seen that petitioners that have been denied at the district level either have gone on to appeal that decision or have gone directly to the county and submitted a countywide petition, which is substantially similar to one that they submitted to the district and was denied. So they're using the countywide process as a pseudo appeal to that district process. And it's important that we maintain the integrity of both the countywide process and the district process. And we feel that this change helps create that integrity. And then in instances where the county is considering those types of petitions that really should be petitions that should go to the district first. We've created a process by which counties could receive information about the impact that petition would have upon the district. And by authorizing school districts that are affected by that proposed charter school to provide evidence and testimony to county boards of education on 3 items. And all of which I'm talking about right now are not new concepts. These are already in existing law. We're simply extending them to school districts that could potentially be impacted by these charter petitions. So the school district to have an opportunity to discuss the community impact. That's something that already exists under the district authorizing statute and the county-wide authorizing statute. So in this instance, the school district could present evidence and testimony on that. Secondly, fiscal impact on school district. This is particularly important because there's no explicit requirement that the fiscal impact be considered during the county-wide process, specific to the impact that it would have upon the school district. So 1380 would allow a school district to be able to provide evidence and testimony on that on the impact that proposed charter school would have on the school district. And then finally, the school district would be able to prevent evidence and testimony on whether the charter school's educational services cannot be served as well by one that operates in one district. And again, this is something that counties are already tasked with under the existing Charter School Act. What we're doing is we're allowing a school district to be able to opine on that when the countywide petition is taken up before the county board. And this last part of the bill that's described in this slide is, remember, may be necessary in instances where a petitioner, knowing that the petition that they're submitting is one that should really go to the district, is going directly to the county for a countywide process. And the other reason why this is important as well is because the statute doesn't really provide a very clear definition as to what a countywide charter school is and what a district charter school is, other than that this last piece about that the educational services cannot be served as well by one that operates in one district. So we want to make that clear. We think that with these changes, it helps avoid what we're seeing now is conflicts between districts and counties. These conflicts are happening locally, and they're evolving into legal disputes that result in both districts and counties experiencing increased litigation costs as a result. So without these changes, we expect to see more of this. We think with these changes, it helps provide more information to both counties and districts regarding whether there's going to be a dispute over these petitions. Next slide, please. So as this bill has now come out of its policy committee and been heard in the appropriations committee, there's been some misinformation presented publicly on the bill. And we wanted to highlight some of these and clarify the record. So first of all, we've heard from opponents to the bill that it applies to renewals, and that's false. Current law already prohibits an authorizer from denying a renewal based upon fiscal impact findings. That's already in current statute. So there's no way that these provisions that are proposed under 1380 would apply. We're not making any changes to that provision. The second misrepresentation is that that the bill fixes a problem that only exists in one district, and that's false. Similar conflicts have arisen in other parts of the state before and since the introduction of the bill. We saw the development of this issue in Napa Valley. We're seeing in other parts of the state similar situations to Napa happening, even involving litigation in those instances as well. So, and now that we're at a point where AB 1505 has been in statute, and it really focused on and implemented a more effective tool to assess the impact that a proposed charter school would have upon a district. It is that situation is creating incentive for petitioners to look to other authorizers to get their what should really be district authorized charter schools approved. So that's why we think that it's that we're only seeing the start of this problem, and that it's going to grow worse as time goes on. So the next misrepresentation is that the bill effectively repeals current law allowing charter schools, allowing charters rejected by a district to seek approval by County Board of Education. And that's false. The bill does not change the appeal process in any way. A petitioner whose petition has been denied by a district can continue to have that petition heard again by the county board. This bill does not change that process in any way. And furthermore, the countywide authorization process is not part of the appeal process. So it doesn't make sense that the changes that we're making to that countywide process can be characterized in any way as limiting a charter's ability or a petitioner's ability to seek approval from a county board of education after their petition has been rejected by a district. And I'll note that this one was an assertion that was made by in an opinion in Cal Matters, and I think that's why it's important that we highlight it with you today, in that that may be repeated, so you have at least a correction here about how 1380 really operates. And then one of the other misrepresentations we want to bring to your attention is that that the bill curtails county board authority, which is false. CSBA, going back to when AB 1505 was moving through the legislature, we were one of the preeminent voices there that arguing to protect the county board authority to hear appeals de novo, meaning that they could hear it and make a decision outside of what the district's decision was on the appeal, on the petition before it was appealed. The changes that 1380 makes to the countywide petition process preserves and enhances the countywide authorizing process in an attempt to avoid what we're seeing now with the increase in litigation and conflicts at the local level. Next slide, please. So in terms of county board member involvement on 1380, as I mentioned earlier, the bill has been heard by the Senate Appropriations Committee. It's currently residing on the committee's suspense file. It's kind of a holding place right now for bills that the committee determines would have some fiscal impact, even though that this bill would have little and no fiscal impact upon counties, because counties would already be doing the work of reviewing petitions that they receive now. So the reason I bring that up is that, we're still early on in the process with respect to the legislature's consideration of the bill. And, and there's many opportunities going forward for us to work with stakeholders to address concerns going forward. And as we're doing that, also have opportunities to get feedback from county board members throughout that process, including from our county board members serving on our legislative committee, and then other board members that might have an interest in the legislation that might want to contact me or GR directly. So the one thing that I will highlight too is that as we look at reforms to the Charter School Act, CSBA is always laser focused on protecting county boards' authority to authorize charters and its authority to hear appeals de novo. And those are principles that we've applied going back to reforms to the Charter School Act and as a co-sponsor on 1380. As the bill is going to be amended, whether those amendments come from the co-sponsors or are proposed by committees, those amendments, proposed amendments, will be discussed with our county board member on our ledge committee. I will be working directly with John and others on our committee to run those proposed amendments by them, discuss those amendments with them, and then make sure that their input is taken into consideration as we're working on those amendments and providing our feedback to the legislature. In addition to those interactions that we'll have with county board members, we'll of course be providing regular updates to our CSBA Legislative Committee on 1380, and then also providing regular updates to our CSBA membership through our communications, at key points when CSBA or when SB 1380 moves through the legislative process. So next slide, please. So I do want to thank you. Those were the pieces that our government relations team wanted to share with you today, and I'll turn it back over to Troy.
Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate that review. Now we'll move on to the question and answer portion of this presentation, beginning with the questions that were submitted during registration, and also thank you to CSBA staff and the panelists who've been steadily answering questions throughout the webinar. So the first question that we received during the registration phase of this webinar is a request for education on some of the differences and commonalities between school district boards and COE boards, and how that provides opportunities for collaboration. So I will present this question to the field. If there's anyone that wants to talk about some of the significant differences between COE boards and local school district boards, and then also how those two groups could collaborate to strengthen a unified CSBA, please jump in.
Well, I'll start, and then Dr. Flores has his hand up, so Dr. Flores can go after me. This is one of the things that the transition group has discussed, and I think it's one of the frustrations that both county members and local district members have had.
I guess we could take it down.
A lack of understanding, and also a lack of collaboration, spirit of collaboration. How can we work together to make the whole education system within our regions, our counties, within our state work better? So it's something that, particularly when we look at programming for the county conference, for AEC, that's something that we want to put a focus on.
Thanks, John. If I can expand, and Troy, if I understood the question properly, differences between a local district and a county district. So again, 16 years on the board, it's taken me a while to figure it out. But one of the biggest differences is we are, in essence, an appeals body. Interdistrict transfers, expulsion appeals, charter school appeals is the main difference. That's one of our main duties that we are chartered to take care of. The other main difference is structurally, our superintendent, except for 4 counties, is an elected official. In local districts, the governing board, the local board, basically hires and fires the superintendent. In our case, we have a fellow elected official that we have to interact with. So our governance structure is slightly different because it's not like we can tell him or her what to do. That's a fellow elected official. So right off the bat, those are the 2 main differences that come to mind between a local board and a county board.
And Troy, I just want to add, as far as CSBA is concerned, I can tell you that I don't look at my county board members or my district members any differently. You know, I believe that CSBA is actively trying to make sure that we have the resources and trainings and policies for both entities. And I would just say that, you know, besides there being a lot more district board members, I see each and every one the same. So obviously, you know, we deal with them differently as far as policies and certain things. But from the CSBA perspective, from my perspective, I look at them as one and the same. So they're all our board members, whether county board members or district board members.
Thank you for that, Albert. Moving on, the second question says, since county boards are appointed by county supervisors, how does that impact oversight regarding CSBA since these are not elected members?
Well, as far as Dr. Flores touched on it, they're the only one that I know that is a county board that is appointed by supervisors is Los Angeles County. There might be others, and so forgive my ignorance, but every other county board that I'm familiar with, the county members are elected by either at-large or their trustee area.
That is my understanding as well, is that LA is the exception and not the norm, and everyone else is elected. If someone knows differently, again, please inform us of that, but LA is definitely an outlier in that area. The next question is a process question regarding why CSBA made the decision in the way that it did after the board decision in November. The person feels there was a lack of transparency and wants to know why there wasn't more engagement prior to the announcement. I believe Albert did discuss this at length in his comments, but if anyone wants to reinforce that message. Albert, I would direct that question to you as the president, and since you did touch on it already in your remarks.
Yeah, I think until a decision was made, there was not a definite route that the board of directors and CSBA was going to take or undertake with in regards to CCBE. So that process evolved. I could tell you that just even as a president, I didn't know where that was going to go to. So the board of directors did make a decision to not basically address a section, but basically get rid of the section part of the standing rules and thereby eliminating CCBE. But it was something that definitely a lot went into that discussion as far as the previous items and issues that we had in regards to CCBE that I mentioned in the letter. But definitely it's something that there was, as far as transparency, you know, there's a structure that was in place and is in place to help CSBA maneuver and you know, take the input of each and every aspect of our board members throughout the state, whether they're county board members or district board members. And we did that when that decision was made. But as far as being transparent, I think that, you know, it's like any board. Once a decision is made, you move forward. Sometimes there's decisions that are made, you know, whether they be in your closed session or something that definitely, you know, until a decision is made, it's not public. So I would just say that it's something that as we move forward, we work with our entities, and I believe that that's why this Region 14 is very important for the structure and governance of CSBA. So I look forward to having the Delegate Assembly approve that bylaw change to incorporate Region 14 and a new regional director for Region 14 into our governance structure.
Thank you, Al. Oh, Mike, did you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, Troy, I want to add one other thing to this. Sometimes it seems like all of this happened in the space of one moment. And I want to go back to when I was serving as director at large county, and then when I was an officer for CSBA, that oftentimes Vernon and I had conversations around how do we continue to bring CCBE at that time along so that they are also receiving the respect and the support that we should have been receiving all along. And I was also a part of the group that created that vision statement about being the leading voice for public education. That doesn't happen without county boards. And the conversation we've been having has started years ago. So I'm going to say back in 2014, 2015, we really began making a concerted effort to align things so that the support for the county board members looks just like the support, if not even better than the support that district members get. There's always been this false notion that CSBA and CCBE are two separate organizations, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So a lot of this has just been a long road of work that's been happening for many, many years prior. And it was just, unfortunately, a couple bad instances that really brought this forward in the way that we are seeing it now. But this conversation has been going on from a proactive approach for quite some time now, as we've been continuing to try and figure out if we're really going to be the leading voice of public education in California, how do we make that so that it not only just applies to districts, but it also applies to county boards. And again, I think this has been going on for a while, not always negative, sometimes in the sense of being proactive and collaborative. And unfortunately, it was just a couple small incidents that happened that really brought it into this light that makes it seem as though this came out of nowhere. But I honestly want to say that I think in my experience, this has been a conversation that's been ongoing. We've had some great moments where it's been created the stimulus, the reason for it. And we've had some other moments where it's been some of the things that we kind of could see were going to cause a problem. So I just thought I should add that part of it as well.
Thanks, Mike. That was a helpful addition. The next question is somewhat related. Please detail how members of CCBE will retain integrity and autonomy as well as productive connections with one another. So just, I guess, asking how will county interests continue to be served, and how will the county board voice remain vibrant in the new configuration under county board member services?
Yeah, since that sort of falls under my subject, I would honestly say that the new Region 14 structure, since it does strengthen the connection between county members and local district members, and also strengthens the interaction with county members being on the ledge committee, I think there's an opportunity for actual improvement in terms of communicating, both in terms of services and advocacy and those things that are important to county members. Then also, the same group that was the CCBE board of directors will be the regional directors, or the delegates of the region that can give input to the regional director, who can then communicate that to the other members of the board and staff. And I would ask that everyone reserve a little judgment until we get a chance to come up with the full plan for the transition group. But as I mentioned, we have heard that we want county members giving input on county programming. And so we're working on that. And then also we've heard that we do want to maintain that identity and that ability to network, that the ability for county members to get together with other county members and talk about county member stuff specifically. And we're incorporating that into the plan as well.
Thank you. We have a question related to refunds, specifically prorated refunds for the fiscal 23-24 membership that was paid. Will there be refunds provided? And Vernon, I believe you were addressing the financial topics.
Yeah, so were you do you say proration? Is that what you said, or what did you?
Yeah, so as written, the question says prorated refunds.
Refunds, okay, all right, I'm gonna say proration. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're, 2 months away from the end of the fiscal year. I think the main activities have occurred. You've had the September conference, you've had the March training that occurred. And so those things were delivered, and planning, frankly, for the fall conference is, going to be underway. And so and that I don't know that that's going to be happening.
Okay. Thank you, Vernon. The next question focuses on county board members and asking if in this new configuration with county board member services, and if you could come back, Vernon, because this is also of a financial nature. Why would county board members need to pay more for services if they're in the same union, if you will, as local school district members?
So, I mean, I think these are, we're looking at doing, it'll depend on, what happens with the transitional working group, right? That work has to continue. What potential new activities are going to be, are being proposed as a part of that. And then that will ultimately, go to the board, and decisions will have to be made about, what activities are moved forward, and if they require additional support, and then what that looks like.
Okay, and we have one more question, so don't go anywhere, related to the finances. What happens to the CCBE bank account?
Yeah, so I mean, technically, CCBE never had a bank account or any type of ID, state ID, because CCBE wasn't organized as a legal structure with the state or federal entities. So there is no technical bank account. It's, funds have always been managed by CSBA as the fiduciary agent of this subsection of CSBA. And so if the individual is really getting up to the question of the net assets that I went over in the presentation, it's the same response, which is those net assets will be retained in the CCBE designated reserve that's established at CSBA.
Thank you very much, Vernon. The next question, I think, was covered in depth during the course of the presentation, but for the purposes of the Q&A, we'll revisit this topic. The members said that CCBE seemed to be working well as is. What were the primary reasons for the change, and what benefits should county boards expect? And this question is open to anyone.
So I'll go first. As I was just saying, this hasn't just been because there were troubles. This has been an ongoing reorganization. The CSBA put together a governance study group followed by a governance task force. And this is also some conversation that came up then about how do we increase the opportunities for county board members. We look specifically at that. And I think one of the things that stands out to me right off the bat is that for much of what CCBE did, and again, as a member of the directors at large who was part of that organization early on in my time with CSBA, I was struck by how often most of the work being done by the CCBE members was done by that members, by the folks. And it was a tremendous amount of time expected. And it often limited the number of people who could take active roles in leadership for CCBE. And I think one of the greatest benefits right off the bat, the first thing that occurred to me is that now, having been a chair for the annual education conference committee, we now get the same team that organizes a conference for 4,000 to 5,000 people who are now helping organize a conference for 300 to 400 people, or 200 to 400, whatever that number looks like. It's the same thing. So now the support and the staffing that the county board services starts to get, it increases significantly, allowing us to do so much more and have such a greater impact. We did the same thing when we talked about changing it from a county or CCBE newsletter to a newsletter that was part of the CSBA structure, and it is continued to increase. So every time we've taken a step at unifying the two groups, the opportunity, the benefit to CCBE has, I believe, been well worth it. And it's been an opportunity that's increased the CCBE voice or county board members' voices. And so I'll let John also share some thoughts with that as well.
Yeah, and I touched on it briefly during my presentation. One of the challenges that CCBE had was the annual election of basically a president-elect and other officers by the full membership, and it was always extremely difficult, and it always seemed disjointed, particularly as the CCBE president was only on the CSBA board for 1 year, and then we turned it over again. So I think going to this organizational structure where the Region 14 director will be elected every 2 years, is eligible for re-election, and is elected directly by the delegates of Region 14, will be an improvement, both in terms of how we are able to focus what we want as county members within CSBA, and in terms of the relationship with for county members and the board of directors and staff. So I put my hand up and, will say that in terms of what's going to be better, I think that's going to be better.
Thanks, John. The next question pertains to small districts or small COEs. And the question is, they're interested in what we have to offer for COE board members, particularly to provide support for those trustees in COEs of small counties.
As I look at some of the names that are represented within Region 14, many of them come as even the Transition Working Group. Many of us come from small rural counties. I'll raise my hand. And I think the opportunity again is that staffing and the perspective that we already have that we bring with it to the conversation allows the staff that CSBA currently has to reach out and connect with us and meet with some of our concerns. I think what's going to allow is this new structure, if you will. It'll allow a greater influence from smalls and from rural so that we can make sure that those voices are heard. And I can guarantee you my end of it, I appreciate it as I see it often. Again, coming from one of the smaller county boards around. Go ahead, John, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, not to beat the proverbial dead horse, but I think the fact that we are now moving to a structure where the county delegates, which includes those delegates who represent rurals, our Region 9 is a very rural region from a county perspective. Santa Cruz, San Benito, Monterey, and San Luis Obispo. The fact that we are going to have the opportunity for those delegates to elect the Region 14 president, directly gives a greater voice to those smaller rural delegates and counties to make sure that they're part of the conversation and they're part of the criteria in selecting what the leadership of Region 14 is going to be.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that response. The next question is more from a local school district perspective, and they're wondering how we're going to address the issue of county boards of education that in the terms of the person submitting the question, not from CSBA's perspective, are working to undermine TK-12 Board of Educations in their jurisdiction, especially with regard to charter school decisions.
I'll jump in. Yeah. And I'll simply say that this is one of the things I think is about a conversation around relationships between county boards and district boards. And sometimes the misnomers and communications or thoughts that go around. I will simply say that it's my belief, again, my experience, that when county board members and district board members get together and have a conversation together, even the difficult ones that address that concern that you, whoever that person is, whatever that question, whoever is asking that question, those concerns are really mitigated best when we are all in the same room together. And I can tell you there have been several experiences that I've heard from other district board members who have said once they've had a conversation, a good conversation around purpose with other county board members, it's been a wonderful opportunity to have an aha moment that we are both working on the same thing. But as county board members, we have different restrictions and things that we are tied to that districts don't necessarily have to deal with. And again, as Dr. Flores talked about, we have that appellate space that we occupy that sometimes makes us look like we're an adversary. And I can guarantee you we're not. We're constantly looking for how do we support districts in the work that you're doing, because it impacts the work that we are doing. And so we're talking about the same thing. We're going to have what's best for students. And we just have a different role in there sometimes, which creates that conflict. But that's just simply a matter of having those conversations where, again, we're in the room together. Part of the benefit I see moving forward is that we're no longer looking at the county boards as if they are a separate organization. We're starting to understand this, the notion of how important that the conversation is between both groups, and that we're moving forward in this, trying to figure out what's the united way so that we're doing best by all of those students. So I can tell you that's definitely a conversation, something that I think it just needs more time in the room together so that misunderstandings about how we approach that work can be dealt with openly.
Thank you, Mike. We're nearing the end of our time, so we just have two more questions to get to, and I'll combine them into one question. That is, what is the future of the March or the spring conference? That was a CCBE institution, and that I would point out continued this year and generally received good reviews when it was held here in Sacramento under the umbrella of County Board Member Services. And also, will counties have a role in upcoming AECs? And I know we've developed a committee specifically to increase the county board input to make AEC even more relevant to counties based on input from COE trustees. So I don't know if anyone wants to amplify or augment what I said.
I would just like to put in one final plug for folks to submit their feedback in the survey, or for the survey. They have 2 days. And I think that is the type of input that would be helpful to hear from board members throughout the state. So I know that it was a question for our group, but I would just say that information would be helpful to hear from county board members from throughout the state. And this is the opportunity. We are all working together in order to be transformational. And so we can't do that without the input from members throughout the state.
Yeah, and Dr. Flores kind of touched on this. We are hearing through both the communications we see from county boards as well as the survey, tremendous amount of interest to continue to have county-specific programming, conference, workshops, county-specific programming, and then also, and I think this is an opportunity as well, do a better job with county-specific programming at AEC. And as Dr. Flores said, instead of making them independent of one another, making it linear, connecting them in terms of, okay, at the first program of the year, we talk about A, and then in the second program of the year, we talk about A again, but maybe at a different level in a different way. So it's certainly, I would say, it's been a focus of the conversations of the working group, those specific programming opportunities, and something that we're really getting down on paper.
And Troy, I just want to chime in on this as well. So you referenced that the March event was done under the banner of County Board Services. But while that's true, I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize that it was the county board members who worked on this, who were part of the Transitional Working Group, et cetera, who put the content together. And I think, as John or Ramon said earlier, it was delivered right by county board members. And I think that's the model, right, going forward. That's so critically important, and that you heard expressed from Albert and from Mike and from others as well about going forward. This is about opportunity and making sure that our county board members are fully integrated and engaged in these important events and activities.
Yeah, absolutely right. Oh, Albert.
Yeah, no, I just want to reiterate what everybody seems to have said. We need you to be engaged. We need you to get that feedback. I know the Transitional Working Group, part of what they've heard was that they wanted to continue, that the county board members wanted to continue to see these trainings and this conference here in September. And I could tell you, as the president of CSBA, we're going to meet the needs of our county board members. And, definitely if that's a need that they felt that they wanted to see, that's what we did here in March, and that's what we'll be doing here in September. And definitely want to make sure that we meet the needs and provide the resources and policies, whatever it may be, that our county board members need. So definitely, we need you to be engaged. We need your input. And as Ms. Knowles mentioned, county board member Knowles mentioned, fill out that survey. The more information we have, the better we're going to be as a team.
Absolutely. And so again, surveys due by the end of Friday. I think Albert's message is a great note to end on. Thank you to the 91 people who participated today. That's almost a quarter of the county board members in the state. That's quite a showing for the middle of a workday in the middle of the week. So I appreciate you all making that sacrifice. To those of you who weren't able to watch live, you will be receiving a copy of this recording before the end of the day, Friday, May 10th. So that information is there for you to refer to. We encourage you to keep the lines of communication open as we continue to build county board member services into something bigger and even better that serves the needs of county office trustees and the students that you are dedicated to. So thanks again, all. Take care. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Bye.